Hi, I'm William Stewart. Welcome back to our verse by verse study on the book of Second Peter. I'm glad you're here. We're in the first chapter, an amazing chapter it's been. Peter just finished saying in verse 15 that he is uh, prompted to put into the minds of the northern Turkish, central Turkish, really Asia Minor, they weren't Turks at this point, the Asia Minor Peninsula of Asia, the continent of Asia, put in their minds again the things that he has taught them. And then we start in verse 16. We're covering 16 through 18 today, those three verses in chapter 1. 4, and again, this is the explanation of when he uses this word of the prior verse. He puts it into their remembrance because he knows what he is saying is correct. Listen to verse 16. For we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known to you unto the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but were eyewitnesses of his majesty. So what's he talking about here? Well, he's talking about the transfiguration, a important part of Christ's life, and it is documented in the synoptic gospels, Matthew chapter 17, and in Luke 9 and Mark 9. This is when Christ took his three closest apostles, James, John, and Peter, up to the top of the mount. We don't know which mount. Some think it's Mount Tabor, southwest of the Sea of Galilee, and unveiled himself, and his glory shone through. Appearing with him then was Elijah and Moses, speaking with Christ. Now, why Elijah and Moses, we don't know. I think it's because these two great figures of the Old Testament brought in new revelation, accompanied with signs, and perhaps also Elijah being translated directly into heaven without seeing death. Moses, although he died, his grave has never been found, uh, indicating a sort of perhaps a pseudo-type of a resurrection and a type of resurrection of Elijah. Christ himself, of course, is resurrected. And after he sees death on the cross, he is resurrected to new life. Of course, he also brings in vast amounts of new revelation, the New Testament. So these two figures would be a fitting accompaniment to Christ during this time. Let's go to verse 17. For he received from God the Father honor and glory when it came such a voice to him from the excellent glory, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. So Christ, you remember, is both God and all man. And being all God, he's perfect. He's perfect to judge and perfect to love, to bring us salvation as a satisfactory sacrifice as man on the cross. And God testified of his satisfaction of Christ here as a voice from heaven to James, Peter, and John. Very important event. Now, he also testified at Christ's baptism and will testify again in John 12, speaking again from heaven. 18, and this is the voice that came from heaven, and we heard when we were there with him in the Holy Mount. So this is one of the great testimonies of Christ. Remember, John the Baptist testified of Christ. Many of the people healed or Christ knew testified of him, such as Mary and Thomas. Christ testified unto himself. But as we know from 1 John 5, the greatest testimony came from heaven. Otherwise, his baptism, here at the Mount of Transfiguration, his death and resurrection, and God's intervention with miracles during that time, and the miracle of the resurrection itself, and speaking from heaven, soon before the resurrection. So this is in bringing the remembrance to the recipients of the letter here is reminding them of Peter's authority. He's not bringing them fables. He's seeing Christ ministered with him, followed him on earth. He's seen the risen Christ, God's testimony of him, and the Spirit's testimony as well. Well, we don't know that he was at his baptism, but God's testimony of him. This should give the recipients of the letter comfort, knowing that they've received the truth. And he's reminding them of that they should have confidence, that they have the truth, the salvation, and how to live their lives. Okay, thank you for joining me today. We'll continue on to another reminder of, and perhaps it's a new teaching